So there's been a lot of misconceptions. I guess a lot of people throwing their hat in the ring recently about in my comments about what I believe in and maybe my ideological leanings and things of that nature. So I decided, I guess for fun, to make this video, taking the most famous political compass test to see where I land. I haven't taken it in a while, and yeah, obviously, this is not concrete. This is not exactly what I will always believe in and will always endorse and all that kind of stuff. I'm open to having my mind changed. I actually want to have my mind changed as much as possible. I think constantly having a nuanced and more evolved opinion is good. But with that in mind, I guess I'll start taking the test and I'll try to give my reasonings as to what I choose and things of that nature. So the first prompt it says, if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interest of transnational corporations. Um, Now this is going to be the libertarian kicking out on me. I genuinely believe in free markets and things like that, and this idea of serving humanity is something that is up to way too loose interpretation for me, and I think that can be mishandled. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. Disagree. There was this famous quote by this civil rights activist that I really like. I forgot his name. But something along the lines of, I love my country so much, and is that the reason is, because I love my country so much, I have the ability and I have the obligation to criticize it to its highest capabilities. So, always wanting to have a better union. Anywho, no one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I'm going to say slightly, I'm going to slightly disagree. This obviously a little bit contradicts my previous point, but I think, an essential function to being a good human, a good steward, a political steward, is being proud where you're from. That does not mean to be proud of your country no matter what, but, have this little bit of patriotism to say, yeah, we're all American here. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Obviously, I think the answer is no. I don't think my race specifically, my Indian heritage, is less than others, but I don't think it's greater than others, so that's definitely a disagree. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, disagree. I'm the type of guy who says right is right, wrong is wrong. I don't care if it's the enemy of my enemy. If they're doing something immoral or something that hurts my country, I don't like that. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Now, the thing is, it's like, is it justified if the other country doesn't break any laws and then you start breaking laws? The answer is probably going to be for no. So I think this question is a little bit vague. Um, but I'm going to say agree just because I can think of a heinous situation where, other countries don't abide by international laws, therefore, you shouldn't be subjected to those laws. Um, Hold on, I gotta make sure it's in view. Okay. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Yeah, 100% agree. Um, it's not my choice, though, however. I don't think we should start placing more restrictions or making the media more factual or whatever that kind of is, because, as earlier mentioned, who gets to be the boss of that? Who gets to be the king? Everybody has their own definition of what facts are and what is unbiased. So, yeah. People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. I'm going to say 100% yes. I think Bernie Sanders going on tour with AOC is proving just that. The idea of identity politics is long gone at this point, and it's more of a class divide, if anything. And I can't wait to see, I guess, how that play out, how both parties will receive of it. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Strongly, strongly, strongly agree. Um, you know, it's the classic chicken or the egg thing. But in this situation, it's like if everybody's employed, sure, that would be, seems good on paper, right? But, inflation's out the wazoo and the government is printing too much money. What's the use of all those dollars you make? So, no, inflation to me is more important. And I think I happen to believe in the economic theory of the invisible hand and Milton Friedman, things of that nature. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Agree, but not strongly agree. I think the best way to move about environmentalism is to work towards a future where the environmental option is the best option. I don't want to force companies too much to have to abide to environmental regulations, especially if said environmental regulations um, hurt the economy in the long run. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. I'm going to disagree on this. This is a classic Marxist or socialist ideology. And, I think one thing I will always say about socialism is that it comes from the heart. A lot of socialists I talk to are well-intended people. However, I think, practically speaking, socialism is not the best way, especially in this country, how diverse we are and how many viewpoints and how many people have a seat at the table. Yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. And also on top of that, this idea of each according to his ability to each according to his need. So those two ideas of ability and need are subjective at core, and I don't trust any governing authority to decide how someone's ability ranks or how someone's need ranks. That should be decided by a free market. Speaking of the freer the market, the freer the people. 100%. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now bottled, branded consumer product. I'm going to say disagree on this. There are water fountains out there for free, whatever. It's your choice whether or not you want to buy the water bottle. If consumers didn't want the water bottle, I promise you no company would be making them. Next, land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Strongly disagree. I do not believe that the government should own much, if not all, land. I understand military bases, things of that nature. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw the Trump administration, and this seems to be a bipartisan issue, but to relieve a lot of federal land so it can be developed on for infrastructure purposes and housing purposes. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Now, this does sound like a bad thing. Obviously, nepotism is 100% real, and while you can't avoid it entirely, you can't outlaw it. Most, if not all, billionaires and millionaires are self-made, and therefore this statement to me doesn't really have much prominence. It's not really that jarring of a statement because of the fact that time and time again this country has seen that the most successful people are self-made rather than inherited wealth. So disagree on that. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. This goes back to this idea of tariffs, right? I believe in a totally the freer the market, obviously the freer the people. But there are instances where tariffs are at play. I like to think about national security interests. You don't want other countries, using the technology you have, especially military. So by that definition alone, this sometimes idea sticks out to me. So I'm going to click agree on that. Okay, next, the only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. 100% agree. It's not up to the company to instill good morals or be the shining light that we all need to see. A company is founded with one thing, and that's to make profits. Can you hold them accountable? Sure. Can you boycott? Sure. But it's not up to the company. I think the best way to do social change, social responsibility, as this question is worded, is you could protest, you could boycott, you could do all these sort of things, and that's going to have to force the company to play ball. I think the consumers have more power than they realize. The rich are too highly taxed. I think all the classic stories about Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, such and so forth, not paying their taxes is true. However, too highly taxed, wouldn't agree with that. I don't have enough information to make opinion on that. So I'm going to say disagree, although I would wish that we had measures in place that crony capitalism doesn't exist and people actually pay the taxes they're supposed to. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. I'm going to say strongly agree. If you have more money, you get better medical care. It's like any other commodity out there. However, does that mean that I believe healthcare should be completely, the highest bidder wins? Of course not. In my opinion, in an ideal society, healthcare should be affordable, baseline affordable. Let's say you're impoverished, you're making barely any money, you're making minimum wage. The government has at least a little bit of a responsibility to make sure that your healthcare is affordable, meaning you can purchase it and it won't be such a burden on your life. Anyways, government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Disagree, and this is one of those things again where it's like, okay, that sounds good on paper, but are we really putting our trust in the hands of the government to decide what is misleading and what is not misleading? Um, I don't know. I think a great example is when Joe Biden ordered Mark Zuckerberg to suppress a lot of speech, and a lot of conservatives would say that speech was warranted, that speech was free, that speech was factual. So letting the government have hands in the crowd of what is and what isn't is, I think if a business is truly misleading the public, company or consumers can band together and protest that. Obviously, you could think about Enron, but they were committing, where they were breaking laws, so that's a whole different ballgame. But if a company wants to say, something free speech wise, and it's not violating any law, the government doesn't have the authority to penalize them because who gets to play king, and the government should not be the king. Anyways, a genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Agree. I think too much regulation obviously is not my jive, but I'm not a big fan of monopolies, and any econ professor would tell you that too. Abortion. Here we go. When the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. I'm going to disagree. I Now this is where my personal opinion is coming in. I have my own reservations about abortion. However, as a man, especially, even if it were to be my wife, I just couldn't work myself up to force someone to do something like that. It's just that's the libertarian coming out of me. I think we can have all of our opinions, but at the end of the day, I can't be the judge of that, right? But funny enough, there's a lot of libertarians who are anti-abortion, but they can argue that themselves. All authority should be questioned. Agree, an eye and eye, tooth for tooth. I used to be against the death penalty until Parkland happened. You can read up on that. Super interesting. A lot of the victims had to say a lot of things. Taxpayers should not be expected to pop up any theaters or museums. Disagree. I think museums, especially, are so powerful, and we as a society need to value education. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Disagree. We need to be in school. Simple as that for me. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Disagree. Do I believe in forced intermixing? Forced, we need X amount of black kids, X amount of Asians, X amount of whatever. No, I think we should just all let it naturally play out. But this idea that we're better off to our own people is ridiculous, in my opinion. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Agree. It's natural for children to keep secrets. Agree. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Strongly agree. I am a little opposed to marijuana in public, but private use, I don't really care. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Disagree, but not strongly disagree, only because I think it's important that schools not only teach people, math, science, whatever, but they should teach you how to think, how to be a responsible person. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Disagree. As long as, I don't consider someone with Down syndrome to be a person of suffering. Those days are long gone. If they want to have children, so be it. Who am I to judge? The most important thing for our children to learn is to accept discipline. Nope. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. Disagree. I've made many topics about this. Terrorist culture is bad culture. There's no arguing for it. There's no arguing. This idea of moral relativism is not real. I believe in moral truth. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society support. Ooh, this is a tough one. Able to work and refuse the opportunity. Those two things make me agree. You can't leech off of other people's work. That's ridiculous to me. These two clauses right here: able to work and refuse the opportunity. When you are troubled, it is better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Slightly disagree. I think, you know, it's important that we tackle our problems head on, whether that's through meditation, support groups, whatever suits you. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. Agree, unfortunately. I think, there have been a lot of impressive immigrants there, but, and this is not a bad thing. I think this is just one of those things that is, and I think that's what makes America so special. This idea of full integration is not a thing in this country, and that's what makes us stronger. That's what makes us able to develop and grow, as Ross Perot likes to talk about. What's good for most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. I say slightly disagree. When a corporation is doing what it's supposed to be doing, I think, yeah, most people will benefit, but I'm not liking the word always here. Always is a very generalized thing to say, so I'm probably going to say disagree. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Agree. This is crazy to say, but free speech is not, or free press is not funded press. However, I will concede and say things like children entertainment that are completely obviously nonpartisan are okay in my book. Like PBS Kids. I love PBS Kids. All right, our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Strongly agree. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all arguments. All arguments are good. Although the electronic age makes surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Strongly disagree. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Agree. I think we need to limit the amount of death penalties, but in the most heinous crimes, yes. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people to be below to be commanded. That's a tough one. I would say agree, but I think the differences shouldn't be that too, like the differences of power shouldn't be too much. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Strongly disagree. Art is art. It's all subjective, and I love art. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Now, this one I'm still kind of skeptical about. I have a lot to learn about this concept of criminal justice. But at least right now, agree. But I'm really opening to be proven wrong here. I'm looking to learn more about that. It is a waste of time to rehabilitate some criminals. I will also say agree. A lot of people are repeat offenders, and no matter what you do, you can lead a horse to water, but they have to drink the water. The business person and manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. Ooh, I think they're equally important, but if I had to say one, I would say agree, just because an artist without making commissions or selling their product is useless, and it's unfair for the artist. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Disagree, coming from the libertarian perspective. Live and let live. Almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should heed the warnings of climate science that growth is detrimental to our efforts to curb global warming. I say disagree. It goes back to what I said before about we should push towards this idea that the environmental option is the cheaper option. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Yes, this can be taken from the founding fathers, and they never wanted to declare their independence, but they tried to the peaceful route. The peaceful route didn't work, so they had to use alternative means. Astrology accurately explains many things. Disagree. You cannot be moral without being religious. Strongly disagree. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping genuinely disadvantaged. Agree. I totally believe in the poverty trap. I've seen what charity has done for people. When people are giving away their own money and their own time, their own labor, you see a lot more benefit. Not to say that we should get rid of all Social Security and all welfare. However, I've seen charity go much farther. Some people are naturally unlucky. I don't like the word naturally. That means it's like they're supposed to be unlucky, or it's like no matter what they're unlucky. That's a disagree for me. It is important my child's school instills religious values. Disagree. That breaks the establishment clause for me. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. I really don't have an opinion on that. Let people live. So disagree. Same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of a child adoption. Yeah, I disagree. I mean, there's a lot of conservatives out there who will say that children of same-sex couples are not as well off and things of that nature. But I highly I'm skeptical of those research findings, and I think um, it goes back to my libertarian principles. Um, okay, pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Agree, even though it's terrible, terrible, and it has done a lot of harm. Um, it's not unconstitutional. It's the same vein as how smoking is terrible for you, but you can still smoke. I'm not going to stop you from doing that. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly agree. No one can naturally feel homosexual. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who identify as gay and whatnot, and they say that they were always like that. So disagree. I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, these days about openness about sex has gone too far. I mean, sure, but I don't know. It's I'm kind of iffy on this, and yeah, I don't know because there's always that age-old story about old people in the newspaper complaining how crazy times are, and in reality, it's just this concept of generational divides. But yeah, let's see where I stand. Oh wow, center right libertarian. Wasn't surprised about that. For reference, a Democrat would probably be more authoritarian over here. Republicans right there. Um, but yeah, this is, I guess, subject to change. I guess. Did this surprise you? Did it not surprise you? Let me know. My kind of policy is let people keep their money, or people know what they want to do with their money more than the government, and people know what they want to do behind closed doors more than the government. So I've really been sympathetic towards the libertarian cause. However, as you can see, I still remain in this centrist center kind of area. If that's an issue, let me know. If that's not an issue, let me know. But thank you for watching, and that's probably my longest video of all time. But thank you.